Hey, are you ready for part 2 of how to write a literature review? Okay, so organizing this kind of depends on your method of organization, what makes sense for you. So I've done it a couple of ways. The first, now that you've had at least 10 articles that you've put into a file, you can print them all out and then start reading through and highlighting. That's step one. I've done that. So sometimes I do it that way. Sometimes I do it all online. So if you're an all online, just skip ahead to that. So if you like to print them out and have your hands on the paper, I get a bunch of different color highlighters and I start reading the first article, and I'll kind of make note with a little pencil where I might highlight. Once I've kind of done that, I look back through where I want to highlight and I think, what sort of category does this fall into? So I might highlight and say statistics, or highlight and say current treatment, highlight and say theory, highlight and say general information, highlight and say next research steps. Whatever it is, I'm highlighting them in different colors and I'll use a code. So next to statistics, I might highlight it in purple and do an S. And then at the first page, at the top of the first page above the title, I'll write S, or I'll do the purple with an S over it. So that when I'm looking back and I'm filling in the statistics portion of my manuscript, I'll know this article has stuff about statistics in it. It just kind of helps you organize things that way. And so at the top, I might have statistics, I might have theory on one, and then another one I might have statistics, next methods, or general information. And so I know in order. Then once I've read those articles and put them into my manuscript and put in the references, I enter that citation right into the references right away. Then I put a star or an asterisk on the top to let me know I've documented this one. This one is in my manuscript already. And you go through that way. You can also keep a running sort of tab sheet. What codes am I using? Because maybe you only get to look through one article at a time or one or two at a time. And so you have trouble remembering what your codes are. So I'll have just a piece of computer paper or notebook paper, and I've kind of showed what those codes are. So when I'm going through, I remember, oh, purple was statistics. So you can do it that way. That is my preferred method. It just seems really thorough. And then I have those articles in a folder to look back on if I have a revision needed from an editor or from a professor. Now, the electronic way will be to go through, and you can either organize them by, okay, I see this article, I've read this article, I'm going to put this into a folder in my Google Drive that says statistics, or I'm going to put this in my Google Drive that says theories for this manuscript. Or you can do that and you can organize it that way and then start entering the information. Or you can go through article by article, and I will just, once I know what my codes are, you can kind of put those into your manuscript. So I will start my manuscript. I'll show you that in a second. I'll start my manuscript with the title, with my name, with all that stuff on the title page. I'll fill in the header of abstract if you need an abstract. For most doctoral papers or master's level papers, you don't need an abstract. So just look on the rubric or ask your professor. Then I start with my introduction. Remember, we don't use the header introduction. That's not APA. We just either start the paper or we use the title again. And I'll just start going through and putting the headers. So for a conceptual article, you can do lots of different ones. So I'm going to share with you kind of what mine were. On my latest one, I had an abstract with keywords, which you might not need. And then I went right into I started the introduction, but then so for that, I just put statistics, and I'll take out that heading later, but I'll put current treatment is one. And then as I go through an article, I might enter in, okay, I know this is part of current treatment. I'll make it all make sense later, but right now I'm going to write in the pieces that are important, paraphrasing, right? And then I'll cite that into current treatment. And then I had, what was my next one? Implications for the counseling profession, implications for counselor educator, implications for future research, whatever the implications are. Implications being when I've tied together all this information, I pulled it from all these different journals, all these different spaces, and I've summarized it. Why do we need to know that? What are the implications? How can we use this information now to move forward? Then after that, I have future research. What do we need to do next? Now you've seen what we have. For this case, I was looking at anger in veteran populations. And so I said, hey, research is showing that we have a high level of suicide in the veteran population. We know that. However, we don't have anything connecting anger to suicide in this population. So we want to start on that. We know that folks do better when they have low cost treatments that don't take a long time, that have less stigma. So that should be something too. So just helping folks move forward and knowing how to do that. And then I always have my references, and I make sure that I'm doing that as I'm citing them, so I'm not going back and trying to find all that stuff. That is no fun, and it is inefficient. So for this next step, you're going to get the articles and decide what's the best way to code them, to start to figure out what are the pieces you want to pull out. And you're going to have to categorize those or organize those in some way that makes sense to you. And then start to create those headings in a manuscript in your paper. And then start to fill in those pieces, and you'll weave them in later on. That's part 2. Stick around for part 3.